Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome for our today's lectures to our attendee physically and virtually, and to our speaker, Brother Lee. Good afternoon. Again, this is Hannah, coordinator of Wisdom Park, and your moderator for today's lecture entitled Sutta Study, Technique of Calming Thoughts. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for today. Brother Billy is a retired business development consultant and is certified as Master Practitioner of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, Clinical Hypnotherapist, Laughter Yoga Teacher, and Laughter Ambassador. In sharing the Dharma, Brother Billy studied under the late Venerable Dr. Punnaji Maha Thera and has delivered Dharma sharing throughout Malaysia and other countries. In recent years, Brother Billy has also shared the Dharma extensively in the Philippines at Wisdom Park Manila, as well as the students of Catholic seminary, universities, theosophical societies, and the inmates at the women's prison in Metro Manila. Also, Brother Billy is actively raising funds to provide humanitarian and pandemic relief and assistance to underprivileged and marginalized communities in the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and other Asian countries. Please let us give a warm welcome, Brother Billy.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for today's Dhamma sharing. Today's topic is a sutra study based on Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 20. The title is Technique for Calming Thoughts, and in Pali it is called Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Sutta. You may want to download this document, the sutra by my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punnaji, and follow along if you wish to, but otherwise I will be showing it on the screen anyway. And one of the important things that I'd like to highlight about Bhante Punnaji's translation, that he actually kept it very simple and only focused on the main theme of what the sutra was trying to teach. So there was a lot of other little things that were not included in his translation because they were not directly connected with this technique of calming thoughts. So we're going to take a look at those 5 different techniques for calming thoughts. So feel free to download the sutra translation by my teacher, and then we can follow along. Now, these 5 ways to calm unwholesome thoughts, these are actually for calming thoughts that are disturbing us, calming thoughts that are making us do things that are unwholesome or unpleasant, unhelpful. So the 5 various techniques are, simply put, first is to change the channel in your mind. That means if your mind is burdened with these thoughts, you should now focus on something else. Recollect places, faces, experiences, objects that are wholesome, comforting, relaxing, peaceful, and calm. So change the channel in your mind by focusing on something else. We'll go through each one in a little more detail. The second one is consider consequences of the evil thoughts or the bad thoughts. That means reflect on the consequences, the dangers, destructiveness, harmfulness, and so on of continuing with carrying that unwholesome or negative thoughts or evil thoughts. The third technique is basically to abandon it by simply letting it go. And there are various exercises you can do to learn to let go unwholesome thoughts. Withdrawing your attention from these thoughts, refrain from reflecting or focusing on them in order to relinquish them or let them go. And the fourth technique is to focus on relaxation and calmness. That means put your mind on calming yourself down and relaxing. And there are also exercises we can do to help us do that. And I'll show you the various examples so you can do that at your own pace. And finally, the final technique is practicing tension relaxation exercises. Basically, it's the yin and yang of the body and mind. Tensing and relaxing, tensing and relaxing. And there is something very special about Bhante Punnaji's translation here. I'm going to explain to you there's a slight difference between his translation and the more popular translation, say, by Bhikkhu Bodhi. I will explain a little bit about that because there are some things that doesn't seem to explain well enough in the other translations. So Bhante Punnaji has gone forward to explain it in a slightly different way, and we're going to take a look at that. Now, these 5 techniques are one followed by the other. In other words, you don't choose and pick which one you want to use. You start with the first one. If it doesn't work, you then try the second one. And that's how the sutra, that's how the sutra was developed. The sutra was basically explaining you try the first technique. Then if that doesn't work, you go on to the second technique. If that doesn't work, you go on to the third technique, and so on until finally the final technique is the 5th one. And this is really how the sutra was structured. And we basically just go along with what the Buddha has taught us in this respect. So now, without further ado, let's begin looking at the actual sutra translation by Bhante Punnaji. And he has kept it very straight to the point, without all those other things on the side. So it's basically straight to exactly what the 5 techniques are. And Bhante Punnaji began with the translation by saying, the disciple who is engaged in development of the superior disposition should cultivate 5 mental strategies at the appropriate time. Now, we need to examine a little deeper what these key words are. By superior disposition, Bhante actually was explaining that this had to do with our prevailing tendency. That means when these negative thoughts arise, these unwholesome thoughts arise in our mind, it produces a tendency for us to behave in a certain way. So this tendency leads us to feel something, and that leads us to have a certain mood. And with that mood, we may have a certain inclination of wanting to do something. And with that, then we start to act on it, and that is our temperament. And if that is emotionally charged, then it will be what we call having a temper, right? So basically, the whole idea is to help us cultivate superior disposition, not to fall into the trap of becoming emotional and allowing our prevailing tendencies and mood and inclinations to take control, and so that we can cultivate more positive, superior tendencies and inclinations. And therefore, it is about the disciple who is engaged in development of these superior tendencies should cultivate these 5 mental strategies. And the appropriate times, basically, Bhante was referring to circumstances. When circumstances arise, we should then embrace these 5 techniques to help us purify our thinking. So it's basically about circumstances arising. When the situation demands it, then we have to respond accordingly. So this response is basically what is meant by appropriate times. At that time, when circumstances arise, we need to respond in a positive way. And when the situation demands it, we need to respond positively. So this is the meaning of appropriate times. Then basically the first technique, it's where the Buddha pointed out, if an image arises, just give me a second, I got something on the screen I need to fix. Yeah, okay. If an image arises in a disciple's mind, which as he reflects on it, arouses evil and unworthy thoughts associated with lust, hate, and confusion, then an image contrary to this image, which is worthy, must be reflected upon. So when the Buddha pointed out this thing about an image arising in the mind, it is not just having a picture in the mind. It's a combination of having a mental picture. It's also a thought. A thought is also a mental image, except it is a verbal image. An image arising in the mind is referring to either a picture in the mind, a thought in the mind, or a desire or intention, or a phrase that directs us to do or say something. These are mental images. Day in and day out, we live through life moment to moment with all these mental images rising and falling constantly. This is actually from the sixth sense, and it is gathered through the first five senses. That means based on what we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. And then thoughts are produced in the mind. And these come in the form of mental images. It could be in the form of a picture, or could be in the form of words, or could be in the form of desires or intentions, or even in the form of instructions telling us to do something. So this is what is meant by image in the mind, mental image, right? It's not just only about a picture. And reflect on it. So when these mental images arise and we begin to reflect on it, what it means is that if you begin to ponder over it, you begin to think about it and consider it and contemplate it or deliberate over it, you're actually repeating the whole thought in your mind. And this is referring to negative thoughts, unwholesome thoughts, evil thoughts. So by pondering on it and thinking about it, considering it or contemplating it or deliberating over it, you're actually repeating that thought in the mind. That is what is meant by reflect on it. We should avoid reflecting on it. That is the whole idea. Because it arouses these evil and unworthy thoughts arising. So therefore, when all this happens, we should then refocus our mind on an image which is opposite from the negative, unwholesome, or evil thought, or an unwholesome or evil image in the mind. We should refocus on something more pleasant, something more helpful, something more wholesome. And the word worthy, which is worthy. So that word worthy simply means it is beneficial. It leads to the well-being of ourselves and others. And it leads to peace and harmony. It leads to happiness. So that is what is meant by worthy image or worthy thoughts. Right? So this is really the changing the channel in the mind, refocusing on something which is worthy, so that it helps to benefit us instead of hurting us if that original thought that arises, that negative, unwholesome, evil thought originally that arises is hurting us. So by changing the channel. And then, of course, the sutra went on to say, when this is done, those evil, unworthy thoughts wane and cease. And what is meant by wane and cease is that when you begin to refocus on wholesome thoughts or worthy thoughts, then the unwholesome thoughts will gradually subside and fade away. The two thoughts cannot coexist. You know, if your mind is focusing on one, see, the mind is such that it can only focus on one thing at any one moment in time. Our mind is not multi-programming or multitasking as some people think. When we say multitasking, it is actually focusing on different things one at a time. And that is what the mind does. It can only focus on one thing at a time. So if your mind is focused on worthy thoughts, these unwholesome, unworthy thoughts that started in your mind before that, they will then subside and fade away, allowing you to abandon it, allowing you to let it go. So this is the whole notion behind this first technique of changing the channel in your mind. And then the Buddha went on to give a simile, basically a sort of a metaphor. Just as a skillful carpenter or his assistant removes an old wooden peg by placing a new wooden peg and hammering on it, so the disciple removes a bad mental image by substituting a good mental image. Now, why did the Buddha use this simile of a carpenter and these wooden pegs? In ancient times, they very rarely do they have nails, metal nails. Furnitures are made in such that they are joined together. The wood pieces are joined together, and in order to lock them in, they have holes, and then they put the peg to hammer it in to lock it in. They don't have nails in those days. This is ancient India, 2,600 years ago. So you must imagine in those days that nails are actually expensive items. So maybe only the most wealthy and sophisticated homes can afford those. But the average home will be making furnitures using wood structures that are joined together in such a way that they drill a hole and hammer a peg to hold them together. After some time, these pegs begin to wear out a little bit and begin to rot. And if they rot, then the furniture will be shaky. It will not be very stable. It may break apart. So therefore, a carpenter needs to now hammer out that old peg and then hammer in a new one. That is what is meant by that. In the same way, your mind is filled with these negative thoughts. The whole idea is now to bring in positive thoughts so that it can replace and play down the negative thoughts. I mean, thoughts cannot be removed as it is, but it can be subsided, playing it down, okay? So this is really the whole idea, because in these ancient times, the furnitures are made in such a way that the wooden pieces are joined together, and hole is drilled, and a wooden peg is then hammered in to hold it together. And when they rot, you now need to hammer out the old one and put in a new one. In the same way, if your mind is filled with some negative thoughts, so this technique here, the first technique, is for you to replace it by now focusing on good thoughts and worthy thoughts. So that is what the simile is trying to teach us, okay? So this is the first technique. And this is about changing the channel. So in the sutra, it was mentioned if evil thoughts are lustfulness for a person, that means where we wish for lust, we lust for a person, usually of the opposite sex, this lustfulness. The way to overcome that is to practice meditation on the repulsiveness of the body. It's called Asubha Bhavana. So this is the meditation on the repulsiveness of the body, and that can help us realize and understand that the body is something that is transient, it is anicca, and the body is just made of flesh, that it is not a permanent thing. It comes and goes and it will rot. As we age, the body will weaken and will look ugly. So if we lust for a beautiful person, then after some time, that beautiful person will also become old and maybe ugly or so on, you know. So the way to overcome this kind of lustfulness is to learn meditation on repulsiveness of the body, Asubha Bhavana. So I'm going to give you examples where you can actually practice this. There are exercises that Bhante Punnaji has put in his meditation guide. I will give you the link to download that meditation guide, okay? And another kind of meditation is that if these evil thoughts are thoughts of ill will, that means anger and hatred towards other people, towards somebody, then we need to meditate on metta, universal benevolence, goodwill, loving kindness, compassion. So these are meditation of goodwill, universal benevolence, and compassion. Metta and karuna bhavana. And there are also other kind of thoughts that may arise. The evil thoughts are greed or hatred towards inanimate objects. That means possessions of objects which are not life. This is not talking about people anymore. So the first two is referring to people. The first one is lust for another person, usually, of course, of the opposite sex, right, or of the gender that arouses our desire. The second one is anger and hatred towards another person. But the third one is talking about objects, inanimate objects. For example, your phone, your cell phone, your computer, your car, your house, right? So these are inanimate objects. And basically, if we have these evil thoughts of greed or hatred towards inanimate objects or circumstances, situations, right? Then we need to meditate on the threefold realities of life. That is anicca, dukkha, anatta. Collectively, they are referred to as Tilakkana. Right? Some people call this the three marks of existence, but basically it's threefold realities of life. Therefore, you need to practice the meditation called Tilakkana Bhavana. Okay, and then the next one, if these evil thoughts lead to confusion, vacillation means the mind is toggling back and forth, not knowing what to do. The mind is uncertain, unstable, confused. So this is really a series of vacillation, confusion, uncertainty of what to do next, and even to the level of being depressed. Then you can meditate on recollection of the Buddha, and that is Buddhanusati. Okay, Buddhanusati is meditation on the Buddha, recollection of the Buddha, basically the powers of the Buddha, as well as the goodness of the Buddha, and so on. So this is another meditation we can use if we are experiencing this vacillation, especially when we experience circumstances that we are unhappy with, and then we are confused. Bhante Punnaji has written a series of meditation guide called Ariya Bhavana. And in this level 1, then all these meditations are available. So I'll just show you the whole list of them. There are several of them, so I only gave you a couple of examples. Right? So I'll give you the link at the end of this sharing, so you can download this document, and I've given you there the pages where these meditations are mentioned. Basically, Bhante Punnaji elaborated on simple techniques on how to conduct these meditations. So there are several of them that can be very useful. So feel free at the end of this sharing, download that book, and then you can go through these pages. Also download these slides, because at the end of this sharing, I'm going to give you the link to download all these slides that you are seeing right now. And then the next technique. So here it starts off with when this is done. This is referring to the previous technique. That means after attempting the first technique or trying out the first technique of changing the channel, when this is done, when you have tried that and it didn't work, then it says, if the evil and unworthy thoughts still continue to arise, then one should consider the evil consequences of these evil thoughts. Just a moment. Sorry. Okay. So when we have completed the first technique and it didn't work, now the second technique is to consider evil consequences. That means the consequences of dwelling in these unwholesome thoughts. And here, evil consequences are referring to the consequences, the dangers, the destructiveness, the harmful effects, the damage, and the undesirable outcomes of continuing thinking in that way of these negative, unwholesome, and evil thoughts. So think about the dangers of all that. And the Buddha went on to say, these thoughts are unworthy, these thoughts are incorrect, these thoughts lead to painful circumstances, painful consequences. So that is what we must reflect on, that these thoughts are really going to hurt us. These thoughts are not helpful. And think about the consequences and the damage, how it affects us negatively. When this is done, then of course the thoughts will wane. And then the Buddha went on to give a simile where he says, just as if there is a woman, a man, or a child who is clean and cleanly dressed, and then someone hangs on him, on his neck or her neck, the carcass of a snake, a dog, or a human, he or she would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted. Even so, one considers the evil consequences of evil thoughts they wane and eat and cease. That means if you were to think about the bad consequences, the unwholesome outcome, the harmful or hurtful effects of evil thoughts, the fact that you reflect on these harmful and negative and evil outcomes, it is like as though, somebody putting these carcasses of dogs or whatever on your neck. It's very disgusting. So if you feel it is disgusting, then you should not proceed with it. This is the whole idea behind it. Realize how disgusting the consequences are and learn to then let it go. And of course, I have an extreme picture I'm going to show you. So this is like the extreme case, where you are hanging there together with all these carcasses. So it's very disgusting. And if you look at this picture, you realize it is disgusting. In the same way, if you were thinking about the harmful effects of these bad thoughts, you should be able to feel the same way, that it is very disgusting, that you should not proceed with it. If it is so disgusting, would you like to do this? Would you like to find yourself in that situation? Of course not. So this is the second technique, to reflect on the evil consequences. Okay. So the things to reflect on are consequences, the dangers, the destructiveness, how it destroys your peace and calm and whatever, harmful effects, the damage, and the undesirable outcomes. That is what you should reflect on, realizing that it is disgusting, it is not something you want, then you will give it up. You will not proceed with it. So this is the third technique that the Buddha was teaching us. And it's important that that in a deeper teaching, there is the teaching of hiri and ottappa. Hiri refers to when you see something unpleasant, something unwholesome, something which is not good for you, you learn to avoid it. In other words, preventing you from engaging in doing the bad thing, realizing you should avoid it. This is before the fact, before you do something. Ottappa is referring to after doing it, realizing that how harmful it is, you should refrain from doing it ever again. So one is preventive, the other one is after the fact, right? So one is avoiding, the other one is realizing it is that you've done something bad or no good, you will not do it again. Okay.
The hiri and the ottappa really refers to hiri is before doing a wrong thing. You are reluctant to do the wrong thing. That is hiri. Ottappa means after doing the wrong thing, you begin to feel that you have done something wrong. Repentance. You repent. Hiri is, I call it reluctance and repentance. Before you do it, you are reluctant to do it. After doing it, you begin to repent. Oh, I have done something wrong. Now, that is what is called hiri-ottappa, which is the same thing as the superego of Freud. So these things are very useful to understand so that we are able to gain control over these emotions and the emotional behavior.
So Bhante basically spoke about reluctance and repentance. Reluctance is before you do something, you realize it is not good, so you refuse to do it. That is reluctance. And if you happen to do it unknowingly or without wisdom, and you went ahead and do the thing and realize it is harmful and realize you shouldn't have done it, then you should repent on it. That's why it's reluctance and repentance. Okay, so now the next technique, when this is done, that means now you have tried that reflecting on the negative, the evil consequences, and that didn't work. If the evil and unworthy thoughts still continue to arise, then one should stop paying attention to these thoughts and stop reflecting on it, withdrawing your attention from it. Take your mind off it. And there are some techniques you can use for that. And basically here it is talking about abandoning it, letting go, detaching. Now it's very important to realize this about the mind. If it is something you don't want, if you realize you should not be thinking about it, and that thought pops up, don't fight it. Don't go into conflict with it, because you're creating a conflict. By fighting it, by trying to force it away, push it away, you're creating a conflict. And that is not the way to do it. You have to learn to just let it go, right? And there are techniques for that. But not try to do things like say, go away, go away. Don't try to do that, go away to the thoughts, because the moment you do that, you're actually fighting with that thought. And the more you fight with it, the more it comes back at you. It won't go away. It'll stay there forever. Right? So if ever you have a thought that you don't want, and if you start to fight it, it fights you back. And then it continues to be a conflict in your mind. And that is not good. So learn to let it go in a peaceful way. Right? Be loving kindness, have loving kindness for yourself, and let it go. And let's look at what else is mentioned here. It says, when this is done, the evil thought will wane and cease. And then the Buddha gave another simile. Just as a man with eyes who does not want to see something that comes within range of his vision would then shut his eyes or look aside, even so, one should shut one's mind to these evil thoughts by not paying attention to them, ignoring them, redirecting the mind to look at something else, right? Redirecting the mind, taking the mind away from these unwholesome thoughts. So in other words, withdrawing your attention from these unwholesome thoughts. And the technique to help you do that is called Samapadana. This is part of the right effort. So this is part of the Eightfold Way number 6, which is right effort. And there are 4 exercises. But the first 2 deals with these thoughts arising. What are you going to do with it? So the first 2 steps in these harmonious exercises, Samapadana, the first step is called Samvara. Samvara means withdrawal. Prevent arising of unwholesome states by withdrawing attention from sensory perceptions that cause emotional arousals. So samvara simply means before the unwholesome thoughts pollute your mind, when you realize that it is arising, take your attention away. So this is in a way a kind of preventive stage. Take your mind away from a thought you know that is going to be harmful or hurtful. So learn to withdraw your attention from all that. So that is samvara, withdrawal of attention, of unwholesome thoughts that have not yet arisen. And the next technique in this samapadana is pahana. Okay. And pahana simply means abandonment, letting it go. You see, sometimes these unwholesome thoughts already entered your mind. So somehow, if it has entered your mind, it can arise from your memory. Without you controlling it, it suddenly pops up. And so when these unwholesome thoughts pop up, learn to abandon the unwholesome thoughts that already gone into your mind before by learning to just let go. Don't dwell on it. And there are three facets or three aspects of your mind that is going to produce this problem. Memory of the past. So talking about the past, you're thinking about these past things that are unwholesome, it pops up. The second one is imagination of a future. You begin to think of very unwholesome or evil outcomes. Right? The third one is having expectations on the present moment. Memory of the past, imagination of the future, or expectations in the present. All these can cause the mind to be disturbed by these unwholesome thoughts and cause this emotional arousal. So when emotions are aroused, you begin to behave in a very emotional way. So therefore, learn to then let it go. Letting it go, abandoning it is called pahana. And there are meditations that can help you to do that. Also, other simple mindfulness techniques can also help you to do that. So this is the second step in the 4 steps, samapadana.
Prahana means to throw away. Prahana. Han means to throw away. Prahana is to throw away hardly or in a very strong way, a strong throwing out. You see, it is like we keep a doorkeeper who will let only good things, good people to enter, bad people are thrown out. So we have a strong built doorkeeper so that if someone tries to enter, that person can throw. That means we have to throw out. That is prahana. Now, what are the things we are going to throw out? Although we are guarding the senses in this way, we may be guarding the senses, but still the mind get polluted. How is that? Memories coming. It is not something that we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. What we have seen before, maybe yesterday, or maybe last week, or maybe last month, or maybe even last year. Memories of the past come into our head, but the moment it comes, it has to be thrown out. That is the meaning of prahana. But it's not only something about the past. Maybe something connected with the future comes into our mind. This is the problem. That your mind doesn't stay there. It goes away. So this is why they try to force the mind to stay in one place, and it becomes a big struggle. And that is what they call concentration. So this is the problem, that concentration. But the important thing here is not to start concentrating, but to learn to relax. To learn to relax the body. To relax is not to be doing something, but to stop doing things. So that relaxation is the way to throw out so you throw out not by struggling but by relaxing.
So you throw out not by struggling with it, but by relaxing, abandoning these evil thoughts, and in an assuredly and firm way. That means you have to be determined to do that. Okay, just refuse to entertain these thoughts in your mind, and basically by using relaxation, not concentration. Concentration causes some kind of conflict, but learn to relax and push away the thoughts without fighting it, just let it go. Okay. Now I'll give you an example of real life situation. For example, a young man, a young healthy man driving the car, coming to the stoplight in front of the traffic light, turned red, so he stopped. While the car is stopped there, of course, pedestrians are crossing in front. It so happened there is this beautiful, sexy-looking woman with big boobs and all that, walking right across and bouncing, and very thinly dressed. And it can be very, and this voluptuous-looking woman can be very distracting in many ways and start to create all kinds of lustful thoughts in the mind of the young man. Knowing that, the young man has choice of two ways of preventing that from entering the mind, and that is the samvara part, preventing it from entering the mind, and that is either to shut your eyes, close your eyes, or to turn your head away. Right? Now, closing your eyes is not practical because you are actually supposed to be driving the car right in front of the stoplight or traffic light, so you cannot just sit there and close your eyes, but you can look somewhere else. You can look away, look at the traffic light, look at other cars, look at the car next to you, whatever. Take your attention away. Withdrawing the attention. It's not necessarily just closing your eyes or shutting your eyes, but simply withdrawing your attention. In a similar way, if you were at home, the family is watching television, and the television is showing something very unwholesome, killing, people killing one another, maybe some racial riots or some wars going on like Ukraine or whatever, showing people getting shot at, people getting killed. And these are very unwholesome images. If you were to watch them, dwell on them, it is very unwholesome. So you can't stop the family from watching the TV, because you can't say to the rest of the family, oh, everybody switch off this TV or change to another channel. No, they want to watch the news, and the news is showing these unwholesome pictures. What should you do? Well, walk away, turn your attention away. You don't have to sit in there and join them. So basically turning your attention away to help you prevent it from entering your mind. And that is samvara, the first practice. But there is also the next part. Maybe you could not have avoided easily to walk away or turn away, and all that image has entered your mind already. Just as the young man sitting in front of the stoplight or the traffic light, he has to watch the lights and he has to watch the traffic condition. So this very sexy looking, voluptuous woman walking by, arousing lustful thoughts in many people, that would have already aroused to some degree some lustful thoughts in this young man. He can't avoid that. Now, memory arises, right? Maybe after that event, he drove on and went home, and then as he was resting there, relaxing, suddenly this memory of this very sexy looking woman arising and arousing in this lustful emotions in the young man. Then he should learn to throw away that in a hard way, not fight it, but just let it go quickly and say, this is not the thought I want to entertain. So that second part is called pahana, right? Just move it away. push it away. Not to fight with it, but just push it away and say, okay, I don't want to think about what happened at the stoplight today. So that is the practice of this pahana. And there are meditation you can use to help you train yourself there. So that is the technique that the Buddha has taught us. And then the next technique comes. Okay, so when this is done, if that samvara and pahana did not work, and these evil thoughts continue to arise, then now you should focus on the process of relaxation and calmness, how you can dwell in the activity of relaxing and calming yourself. By doing so, you are calming the mind itself, and by doing so, the thought that was disturbing you, your calm mind would not be entertaining these disturbing thoughts. So this focus on relaxation and calmness is basically to engage in activity which is relaxing, relieving, or releasing tensions in the body. So you could play sports, you could go for a swim, or you could even take a shower, or whatever. If you are experiencing a lot of these very unwholesome thoughts arising, then go and do something which is relaxing. Go and cycle a bike or take a walk in the park and look at the beauty of nature, whatever. Basically engaging in activity which is relaxing, relieving, releasing. So in other words, do something relaxing. So you could do some exercises if you want to. So this is really this technique of doing relaxing and calming activity, engaging in this activity to help you take your mind away from the unwholesome thoughts that are arising. So then the Buddha went on to give a simile. He says, just as a man who is running begins to walk slowly, or a man who is walking slowly begins to stop and stand, or a man who is standing sits down, or a man who is sitting down, who's sitting lies down, thus changing from one more tiresome position to a less tiresome position, and to a more restful or more relaxed position. Even so, one focuses on relaxation and calmness and rest the mind. In other words, when the mind encounters these negative thoughts, the mind is hyperactive. The whole idea here is then to reduce the activity of the mind, slowing the mind down. And one of the ways of slowing the mind down is to engage in some relaxation exercise. The simplest relaxation exercise you can do anywhere in the world, anyhow, anytime, is breathing exercise. Right? Learn to breathe slowly, and that can help you slow down your thinking. By breathing slowly, your mental activity will also slow down. See, normally when we're excited, when we get emotionally charged, we go into a bit of hyperventilation. You know, when a person who is excited, the breathing is usually very rapid, like that, you know. So by learning how to calm down your breathing first, relaxing the body, and that can help your mind to slow down. And when the mind slows down, it is able to let go these negative thoughts. And that's the whole idea behind this. There are many techniques we can use. So let's look at what psychologists have to say about this. Choosing our response. That means something disturbs us. We choose to think more positively. We choose to take our mind away from it. And Viktor Frankl has stated this very clearly. He says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And may I add, it also lies our happiness. So what does he mean by that? Stimulus and response. You see, scientists have always described human beings or any animal as what is called stimulus response organism. Stimulus means this animal or this person is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching the environment. So all this activity in the environment is stimulating the senses of that person. When these activities stimulate the senses of the person processes it in the mind and then react and respond. That's why stimulus, response. Stimulus is what is being perceived. Response is how you respond, you react to it. Between perceiving and reacting, there is a moment, there is an opportunity, you can do something. There is a moment in time you can pause and think about what you have perceived. That's what he meant by having a space. So when you perceive something arousing your emotions, learn to hold it for a second, think about it before you react. Don't immediately react, because when you are aroused and you react immediately, you are always reacting very emotionally. So that's what he meant by that space is that moment that you can hold on to thinking about what has happened before you decide what to do. That means you are able to think of your response with wisdom. Don't react emotionally. So in that space, you have the opportunity to think of something pleasant or something wholesome to do. And that is your power, your ability to choose your response. And if you choose wisely, it will bring you growth and freedom and happiness. And that is what is meant by this quote. Okay. Now, I have a technique that I teach a lot. It is called the 3-step self-compassion. Self-compassion simply means you are kind to yourself always. We experience a lot of emotional things happening around us. So the moment we find things arousing our emotions, making our mind go a little bit crazy, thinking of very unwholesome or evil thoughts, practice this 3-step self-compassion. First, when we perceive something that arouses our emotions, do not react. Pause, hold it. Because when emotions are aroused, it triggers a chain reaction called the fight or flight reaction. The amygdala triggers a chain reaction, releasing stress hormone. So now the body is already tense. We cannot prevent that from happening, but we can reduce the effect that comes afterwards. In other words, when something happens that arouses your emotion, you cannot prevent it. It arouses your emotion right away, and it causes this stress reaction in the body called fight or flight. You cannot prevent that happening. But as soon as you realize that is happening, you can do something about it. And the way to handle that is pause. Don't react. By pausing, you are allowing time for your emotional excitement and your anxiety to calm down. At the same time, all the negative stress hormone flooding through your body, you are allowing time for this stress hormone to subside. But that is not enough. You got to do something on top of that, and that is called relax. Now you got to consciously relax. And one of the best ways to relax is take a deep breath. And by doing so, you are giving more time for these negative stress hormones to subside and go and eventually, completely use up. It no longer releases new one. See, when you pause, you're preventing the amygdala from releasing more negative hormones or stress hormones. And when you relax, you are allowing these already released hormones to go to subside, to be drained away in your body. Right? They won't stay there forever. Therefore, pause, relax are very important, because the relax, you can use breathing deep, take deep breaths, relaxing the body, consciously composing the mind to respond, and then think. You start to think about what can you do. Purposefully now focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem after you have become more calm and composed. In other words, when something happens and you are already excited, at that moment of excitement, you do not have the wisdom to respond wisely. Not many people will have that. So by pausing and relaxing, it gives you the chance to think about it with a calm body and a composed mind. So pause and relax is to calm the body down and allow the mind to compose. And then only you can think about what is the right thing to do, what is a good thing to do, what is a wise thing to do to avoid this arousal getting out of control, right, and all that. So purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. Okay. So before I continue, I would like to remind all the people on Zoom, can you please shut down your mic, because some of you who come online later, your mic is on. So make sure the moment you come on, please turn off your mic, because it can be distracting to others. Okay, thank you. So pause, relax, and think is a very simple 3-step self-compassion technique that can help you stay calm and refocus on solving the problem rather than allowing these negative thoughts driving you to behave in an unwholesome way. Okay, so this is really the technique there. And the relaxation part is very important. Now, the last technique that the Buddha taught, where this is done, when you have reached that point, you try to relax and that didn't work. If the evil and unworthy thoughts still arise, then you should relax the clenched fist. Now, this is Bhante explaining this with his own translation. He says, relax the clenched fist, relax the tongue pressed against the palate, and thus remove the thought associated with evil easily, without exertion, without forcing it, right? By relaxing and calming. And we'll just go on before I explain this further. So this thing about the tongue pressed against the palate or the clenched fist, you see, when something arouses our emotion, our body starts to get tensed up because of the stress hormone. And it is so bad, sometimes our teeth are biting against each other, the tongue is pressed on the upper palate, hard on, and the muscles are all tensed up. It's always like that. So here, the way Bhante Punnaji explained it is, you must learn to now relax these tensions. Right? Only by relaxing the tensions in your body can you calm your mind. Only a relaxed body can produce a calm mind. As long as the body is agitated and stressed physically, the mind cannot be calm. It's very important to realize that. So the first thing you should do is learn to relax the body and calm the mind. And here, Bhante basically, in the practical exercise of explaining this sutra during our meditation retreat, Bhante basically taught us tension, relaxation, tension, relaxation. Because there is a very powerful body and mind connection. So tensing it and then relaxing it. By tensing, relaxing, this activity of tension, relaxation actually helps to soften the mind, slows down the mind, right? Because when your emotions are aroused, you're all tensed up already. Now you got to quickly tense it and relax, tense it and relax. Do it a few times, then stretch it. It's like making dough, you know, making dough in the bakery or in the kitchen by pressing, letting go, you know. So the mind will become more supple. The mind will soften when you tense, relax, tense, relax. It's a very powerful technique. This is yin and yang about body and mind. Tension, relaxation, tension, relaxation. And the technique is to scan the body and see which part of the body seems to be a bit tense. So now you tense it further and then relax it. And this activity of tensing, relaxing is called progressive muscle relaxation, PMR. Okay? And then the Buddha went on to give a simile. He says, just as a strong man might hold a weak man by the head or the body and throw him out easily without exerting himself, being fully relaxed and calm, even so the disciple relaxes the jaws and the tongue and throws out the thought without exerting himself, by relaxing the body and calming the mind. Now, this is what Bhante Punnaji has explained from his translation, and there is a slight difference from what other people have translated. I'll point out the difference in a moment. Bhante Punnaji is advocating tension, relaxation, right? Not just tensing it and forcing it out. You cannot just tense and force a thought out of your mind, right? Thoughts cannot leave your mind simply by forcing it. It doesn't happen. Nobody can do that. Right? So learning how to do this, we must also prepare ourselves to relax. How can we relax? This also can be applied to this technique as well as the fourth technique of focusing on calmness and relaxation. 4 simple steps when you want to learn to relax. First, you find a posture that is comfortable. So you just sit back in a soft posture, not in a tense posture. And then at the same time, you begin the process of just releasing tensions in your muscle groups. Various parts of your body is tense. Just consciously release the tension. Allow your breathing to go on and let it slow down naturally. And then bring your attention inwards. So this is all very important tips for you to start preparing to relax. And these tips are also very helpful for your meditation practice, especially for the beginners. Every time before you begin to meditate, remember these 4 steps and do them. First, find a position where it's comfortable, a posture that is comfortable, and then begin to release tensions from various parts of your body that are tensed up, and then breathe, allow your breathing to slow down, and then bring your attention inwards. And then you are ready to meditate. Most people think that if they want to meditate, they just go to a quiet corner, sit down, close their eyes, and straight away they meditate. And that is not the way to do it. Find a quiet corner, yes, away from people distracting you. Sit down, yes, but not just sit down. Comfortable, soft posture, not a hard or tense posture. And then you need to scan the body. Observe which part of your body is tense and learn to let go. I'll show you some example of this body scanning, okay? Releasing tensions in various muscle groups. So begin by looking at the scalp, the top of your head, basically here, right? And then your forehead and your eye sockets. These are 3 basically interconnected. If you find any part of your scalp, your forehead, and your eye socket are tensed, consciously release the tension. You can do that. Consciously release the tension. You see, if your fist is it's all tensed up, you can consciously release the tension in the fist. In the same way, if your forehead is all tense because of stress hormone, now consciously release it, relax. The scalp, the forehead, the eye socket. Next, the cheek, the jaw, the teeth, and the tongue. Okay. So again, if you feel that there's any tension around here, or your jaw is all tight, or your teeth are clenched, or your tongue is pressed against the upper palate, and these are what the Buddha actually mentioned, then consciously relax and release them. Very often when we are emotional and we're stressed, we find the teeth biting against each other, or the tongue being very stiff and pressed against the upper palate. Consciously let go the muscle tension. Okay. And the next part is the neck and the shoulder and the upper back. Again, do the same thing. And then the chest, the stomach, and so on. There are many other parts of the body you can scan. So if you download the presentation slide, then you can get all these examples. Right. So I'll just go on to show all the others. Your arms, your hand, your palm, your fingers, lower back, the lumbar, which is near the lower part of the back, then the buttocks, your sitting bone contact, your thighs, your knees, your calves, feet, toes, and so on. Right? So all these are scanning. First, scan the body throughout and see which part is tense, and then consciously releasing tensions in these muscle groups. And now I will show you the difference. What Bhikkhu Bodhi translated. I'm not here to criticize other people's translation. Please realize that. I'm just here to point out the differences and how Bhante Punnaji translated and explained his version. I'm not saying who is right, who is wrong. Nobody today can actually say who is right, who is wrong. We can only look at what makes sense, what seems to be sensible, what appears to work. That's the only thing we can do. If we find, like for example, different people go to different meditation teachers to learn meditations. Some teacher teach certain techniques, other teacher teach different kind of techniques. Depending on which technique appeals to that student, make that person able to meditate more successfully, then you choose the teacher that is more helpful to you. In the same way, you have these sutras being translated by different people, and there may be different ways of explaining it. Whichever way you find appeals to you, makes sense to you, then follow that. What doesn't make sense, then you don't have to follow that. So I'm not saying who is right, who is wrong. This is not a criticism of anyone else, but I'm simply pointing out that there is another translation, which is quite similar to other popular translations. And these are the words of Bhikkhu Bodhi. He says, then with his teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, that means the upper palate, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. When with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. That is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Now, if I were to look at what he stated word for word and try to apply the technique, what he's saying is this. When you are seeing that your teeth are clenched, your tongue uprising against the upper palate, this is when you are emotionally very aroused by the thought, then you should force the thought out of your mind. Beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. Force the thought out of your mind. Now, my comment is very simple. If you ask any psychologist, they will tell you that's not going to happen. That won't work. You cannot force a thought out of your mind. You can try as you wish. You cannot force a thought out of your mind, right? So that is what I'm pointing out. That this technique, as far as I can understand, this technique will not work with me. So what works is to tension, relaxation, the yin and yang. And we look at how Bhante Punnaji has put it. Right? He says, when this is done, if the evil, unworthy thoughts still arise, one should relax the clenched teeth, relax the tongue press on the upper palate, and then remove the thoughts associated with evil easily without exertion by relaxing and calming the mind. So in other words, tension, relaxation will make the mind more supple and then calm the mind, and the thought will subside. That is Bhante Punnaji's explanation. And for me, it makes more sense. So I follow this. But you can think about it yourself. So I'm not here to criticize Bhikkhu Bodhi or anybody. They have done tremendous work for the sake of the Buddha Dhamma. So each has his own way of explaining a certain teaching. So, but here you can see some significant difference. This is the application of tensions and relaxation to flex the mind and release the thoughts. Because by flexing the body, you're flexing the mind also. Mind, body are interconnected. So this is really the yin and yang of tension and relaxation. Now, I also have another teacher, Venerable Dr. Pema Ratana, who's also teaching me meditation. He comes to Malaysia frequently, and he's really a very wonderful meditation teacher. He has produced these body awareness exercises. Basically, they are all tension relaxation exercises. And that's the way to slow down the bodily activity, slow down the mental activity, and make the mind more supple and soft and gentle, able to now clearly focus on solution to the problem. So he has a series of body awareness exercises, very fortunately, that I managed to record. I have uploaded it, and this is the link. Please write down, take note of the link. If you download this presentation slides, then you can see the link, right? So you don't have to worry about taking a snapshot unless you don't want to download the slides. But if you download the slides, which I'll show you the link at the end of this presentation, you will be able to get this link to see the video, the YouTube video of body awareness exercises, which is tension relaxation, okay? The yin and the yang of body and mind connections. So this is one. But the Punnaji has also produced another one, very extensive. And this is what we do during all our meditation retreat with Bhante during his time. right? It's based on yoga because Bhante actually was also a yoga practitioner in his younger days. I have given you the link there, tiny.cc Bhante Punnaji yoga video. You can go to that link and you will see the video. It's 45 minutes. So this yoga exercise is 45 minutes, quite extensive. Every time we attend Bhante Punnaji's meditation retreat, every morning we do these exercises because it helps us to bring the body to a state of calmness and composure and soften the mind so that our meditation become more effective. And for me personally, and also many of my colleagues and yogis, they also said, immediately after this yoga exercise is the most beautiful moment to meditate because that's the time when the whole body is soft and then the mind is very supple and soft and easy to meditate. And some people want to upload it or put it into their cell phone so you can download the audio version. So I uploaded it in the Google Doc that there is this MP3 version. So Bhante Punnaji Yoga MP3. So you can download the MP3 version, put it onto your phone, and every morning, if you want to, you play it and go and do the yoga exercise along with it, okay? And this requires you to lie down on the floor in a peaceful setting. So realize that you need some way of allowing yourself to lie down peacefully on the floor because these are all yoga exercises, but very simple. They're not strenuous. They're not strenuous at all. Very easy to do. So take note of the link when you download these slides. Then you can actually watch the video and also download the MP3 for you to use on your phone. Okay. And finally, in conclusion of the sutra, and the Buddha said, when this is done, those evil, unworthy thoughts associated with lust, hate, and confusion wane and cease. Right? So in the ending of the sutra, when they disappear, the mind stays within, rests within, becomes unified, and enters equilibrium. This is actually quite deep. What the Buddha said in this simple sentence is quite deep. It says, when they disappear, that means when you're able to train your mind to let go these unwholesome thoughts, you have cleansed your mind of unwholesome thoughts. The mind stays within. Now, what does that mean? The mind stays within means that your mind is now focused within. And the practice of this that the Buddha teach is the Satipatthana, right? And some call it the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or some people simply call that mindfulness. So bringing the mind within, the mind stays within. This is really talking about introspective awareness, the practice of Satipatthana. And it is also important, if you really want to progress in your meditation, eventually you must learn to meditate with Satipatthana. Okay. Then the next part, rest within and unified. What does it mean by unified? You see, our mind, there are really 2 parts of the mind. There is a thinking mind where we have some level of control, not 100%, but enough to be able to choose our thoughts. And then there is an emotional mind where we actually do not have direct control. It pops up and makes us emotional, and that emotional mind drives us to do things very emotional. Now, these 2 minds are often conflicting with each other, pulling in opposite direction. One will tell you what is the right thing to do. The other will tell you what is the more lustful thing to do. So you have to balance between what is right and what is lust. Right? Don't engage too much in lust. So they are fighting. Unified means these 2 minds no longer fight. They come together. They are working cohesively in a uniform way, right? Free from emotional arousals, and emotions and reasoning are no longer in conflict. Your emotional mind are the emotions. Your thinking mind will be the reasoning. The 2 are no longer in conflict. Because as long as they're in conflict, there is conflict in your mind will be quite confused. And finally, this leads you to enter into equilibrium. And what does that mean? Simply put, equilibrium is jhana, allowing you to meditate to the point where you're now able to enter into jhana, or the jhanic experience. And the Pali word is jhana, and sometimes you notice there's another word called dhyana. That is actually the Sanskrit word. It's the same thing, exactly the same thing. Just one is Sanskrit, one is Pali. Right? Depending on which teacher you approach, some people will use the word jhana, some people will use the word dhyana. Okay, so it lets you go into this jhana state. So then the Buddha concluded by saying the disciple who achieves this is called master of mind. Master of mind simply means you are now in full control of your mind. Your mind is no longer disturbed with any unwholesome thoughts. You have basically cleansed your mind. And then by so doing, now your mind is unified. You're no longer disturbed by emotions. You are no longer allowing emotions to pop up and disturb you anytime. You are in full control, right? So he thinks what he wants to think. That means you can now use your reasoning, your thinking mind to think clearly, right? And he does not think what is unwanted. So the mind is very focused on good thoughts now. So this is how this sutra plays out. It explains all this. Finally, it says, he has stopped the emotional urge, broken the fetter, removed egoism, and ended suffering. See, as I said, the mind is now unified. There's no longer emotional arousal. He has stopped this emotional urge. This person has now purified his mind. And when the mind is now purified, the mind is now entering into the state of enlightenment. So here the Buddha was referring to enlightenment. Broken the fetters. Fetters are 10 things that prevent us from becoming enlightened. So now you have eradicated those 10 things. Remove egoism. Egoism is basically this self-centeredness. The self, we're thinking of self too much. And it is this self-centeredness that leads us into a lot of difficulties that we cannot experience peace and calm if we are self-centered all the time, right? And then ended suffering means a person who has become enlightened. So here the Buddha is saying, if you're able to purify your mind using these techniques, and then you begin to practice satipatthana, the mind stays within and become unified, and you experience jhana, you are now the master of mind, and you will eventually attain enlightenment. If your practice is pure and no longer disturbed by worldly things. Right? So that is the sutra, and that's all there is. But very quickly, we'll talk about the last part about breaking the fetters. So the first thing you need to do is really preventing all these 5 hindrances. So the practice of this purification of mind using these 5 techniques is to abandon these 5 hindrances. These 5 hindrances are hindering you from successfully meditating. Only when you're able to abandon these 5 hindrances are you able to now go into a state where you begin to experience and enter into jhana. Okay, so that is the 5 hindrances. Then here, quick touch up on the point where the reasoning mind, the thinking mind, and the emotional mind are fighting. We call this fighting vicikicca in Pali, or cognitive dissonance. One part of the mind dwells into the feeling. The other part of, and that's the emotional mind. The other part of the mind dwells into the reasoning. That is the thinking mind. So therefore, the explanation here is that the feeling or the emotional mind, or affective process, as many psychologists want to call it, is now in conflict of or pulling in opposite direction with the reasoning process, which is the thinking mind, the cognitive process. This is the intellect. The two are pulling in opposite directions. Emotions and intellect are pulling in opposite direction. Feeling and reasoning pulling in opposite directions. And what happens when they pull in opposite direction? So the point is that when feeling and reasoning pull in opposite directions, one experiences cognitive dissonance. So the mind is now in a state of vacillation, confusion, because it's pulling in different directions. What should you decide on? Should you follow your emotions, or should you follow your thinking or reasoning? But very often, we always follow our emotions. So one invariably reacts according to feeling, and then justifies one's emotionally charged decision with clever reasoning. So that means when these are pulling in opposite direction, our tendency is to react according to our feeling, react according to emotions. But once we react according to emotions, we actually use our thinking to justify our reaction. That's the trouble with most of us. We use emotions to make decisions. We use our thinking or reasoning to create the excuse for making that decision. Right? So we're very clever because of that. So this is really where the two minds are in conflict. So in summary, in conclusion, the 5 ways to calm unwholesome thoughts are firstly to change the channel by refocusing the mind on something more pleasant and more peaceful, more helpful. The second method is to consider the negative effect or the consequences or the damage, and realizing how disgusting it is, you will not do it. The third is that to learn just to let it go and withdrawing the attention with the practice of samvara and pahana, withdraw your attention from whatever that is unwholesome. The fourth technique is now to go into calmness and relaxation exercises, and slowing down your breathing or whatever, focus on relaxation and calmness. Finally, if all that doesn't work, then the last technique is to use tension relaxation in order to soften the mind so that the mind is no longer easily clinging on to these unwholesome thoughts. A soft mind is able to let go any thought that arises. A tensed mind gets trapped with whatever thought arises. Okay, that's why this last part is very important. Tension, relaxation, not forcing it out of your mind. It doesn't work. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. I hope it has been helpful. Now I give you the link. So you can actually now download the slides that that I have shown you so far. And you can also download Bhante Punnaji's meditation guide, Arya Magga Bhavana, level 1. Use these links here. So first download the slides and you will get the links. And if you have any question after this, please feel free to contact me by email or go to Facebook to send me messages or whatever. Okay. So with that, I end my presentation.